Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Portfolio Rationalization webinar with Microsoft and PwC. My name is Paulette Lee, and I'll be your moderator today. This webinar should be about 45 minutes in length. We're broadcasting this webinar through Teams live event, and the audio can be heard through your PC speakers. Today's webinar is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. Participation in this webinar indicates your consent to being included in the recording. The recording of this webinar and presentation decks will be available to you within 7 to 14 days. Please look for a follow-up email with access details. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. We do have experts standing by to answer your questions throughout the session. And thank you in advance for adhering to the Microsoft Digital Code of Conduct that will be posted in the chat window. Your speakers today are Dan Menicucci with Microsoft, Chad Gray with PwC. They will be joined by Sloan Mankis from PwC for a short Q&A at the end of the session, so please keep those questions coming in the chat window. With that, I will turn it over to Dan. Dan?
Thanks, Paulette. And so thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're listening to this. Today, we're going to have a great session talking about how to rationalize your security portfolio against the capabilities that we provide in the E5 security, compliance, and identity bundles. My name is Dan Menicucci. I'm a Chief Security Advisor inside of our corporate security, compliance, and identity business, working with our customers around security strategy and architecture, helping them to understand the capabilities that we provide and use them to protect themselves wherever they are, whether it's in an on-prem environment, one of our clouds, or third-party cloud environments. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chad for his intro.
Thanks very much, Dan. So good morning, everyone, and happy to be with you today. I'm a partner in our cyber privacy and forensics practice here at PwC, based out of San Antonio. I lead our portfolio rationalization service. I'm also our aerospace and defense cyber lead for the US. And co-lead our Zero Trust architecture service offering as well. Got a background in national security with 20 plus years supporting the National Security Agency and some with Cyber Command, and I'm a retired information warfare officer in the United States Navy. So very nice to be with you. Back over to you, Dan.
Great. So I guess, if we sort of jump into the content here, there's a lot going on in this slide, but, really at the center, we think about, where most organizations came from. There's a corporate network, and in the past, the users, the devices, the data that we were trying to protect as security professionals all existed within that corporate boundary. And we, from a security strategy perspective, worked on this concept of a network perimeter. The idea that everything that we were trying to protect was inside of that perimeter, and all of the adversaries that we were defending against sat on the outside. And then digital transformation happened, and we tried to compete with other parts of the business. Actually, would you mind going back for 1 second to the previous slide? Thanks. This digital transformation happened. We started to adopt different forms of services, cloud services, SaaS being the first part. And we suddenly started to realize that, hey, the data that we're trying to protect is no longer inside of this perimeter. And then we had other things that happened. The COVID pandemic forced a lot of work from home. Depending on what the stance of the company was, most organizations weren't working fully remote. I know at Microsoft, we went from a 10% remote workforce to a 97% remote workforce pretty much overnight, or relatively, in the stream of time. And that presented its own set of challenges where we have, users working remote, they're working from different types of devices and accessing services. And then, when we think about how that has changed, we've also sort of grown our security capabilities to try to adapt to all these changes that we've realized. And you can see sort of scattered throughout this slide are probably a lot of recognizable security vendors in the marketplace. And when we talk to different security companies and organizations, what we hear is, between 50 to 70 different security vendors make up their portfolio. And when I think about, all of those vendors and the time that I spent outside of Microsoft and working with organizations trying to, deploy different services and protect them, there was always constraints around, how much we could do with what we had. And when I think about, 50 to 70 different security vendors in a portfolio, I think about, acquisition costs, that's probably 50 to 70 different RFPs that were conducted, 50 to 70 different contract negotiations, 50 to 70 third-party risk assessments that are, get conducted on a regular basis. The cost of ownership associated with them, there's, IT staff that needs to learn how to deploy these solutions, operate them, get trained. But really the bigger challenge that we see today, especially when we have this large interconnected graph of services, is around having visibility across that. And when we look at all of these different vendors, what we often find out is that they were brought in to address a particular problem, and so they have a siloed view of risk across this greater graph. And organizations attempt to solve that by doing a bunch of integration work, and often that it falls back on the customer to do that, to build and share data between these products so that they can have visibility across this chain. And so if we jump into the next slide, there's quite a bit that customers have had to deal with, from the some of this related to COVID and some of it not. Obviously the nature of work has changed. The reality that most employees were working remote throughout the pandemic. Many companies have decided that they're not going to bring employees back and they can stay 100% remote. But really, on the other side of that, you have to think about, the impacts that the pandemic had on, restaurants, for example. Most cases we weren't able to dine in person, and so those restaurants needed to find a way to stay in business, and a lot of that shifted to, delivery type services, and it required them to, build apps and build a website presence so that people could find their menu, pay, and again, ways for them to adapt to the changes in the world to help them continue to achieve their business outcomes. So we've talked about sort of how digital transformation occurred, and we have services in places where we haven't in the past. It sort of highlights the fact that the focus that we've had previously on building a strong network perimeter isn't a security model that can help meet all the places where users are working today, as well as where the data is that we're trying to protect. And so we're having to deal with the reality where we need to revisit the portfolios that we've built to make sure that the value that we're getting from the tool actually helps us protect the assets that we're trying to protect wherever they may be. And then the last bit is really around, the regulatory landscape. What we see is that there's over 750 regulatory bodies producing over 200 regulatory updates per day. And, it's all for the right reason, to help protect citizens and consumers and help raise the bar so that companies are operating with a level of responsibility. But it's very difficult for even the largest organizations in the world to keep up with that many regulations, that number of changes. And so it puts pressures in additional places of the org, and again, sort of detracts from whatever the larger goal may be. And then, these, for the most part, existed prior to COVID, but, COVID brought another set of challenges, another set of pressures really on top of these previous things. Lots of economic uncertainties. We're starting to turn the page, but businesses are trying to figure out what the long-term impacts are. For the most part, what we're hearing is that, they're putting pressure to, cut costs wherever they can, and it's coming in the form of, at least flat budgets, and in some cases reduced budgets to, again, help make sure that the business remains profitable, we can meet the shareholder expectations, etc. And then the last bit is, as security has become more and more important to companies, the number of jobs has continued to expand. Unfortunately, the pool of candidates to fill those jobs hasn't kept up. And depending on the numbers that you read, it could be a gap of anywhere between 1 and 3 million people. And so if we jump into the next slide. And so from a Microsoft perspective, we think about security around, some basic principles. This idea that we want to provide capabilities that help customers protect everything that they have, because we don't want there to be gaps in their visibility and their coverage, because those gaps are the things that are likely to be exploited. We also want to bring simplicity. We want to reduce the complexity associated with security, and we do that in a number of ways. We leverage the power of the cloud and the principles around that, so that organizations don't have to focus on standing up infrastructure. We want to build that security capability natively into the products that we're trying to protect, or that our customers are trying to protect, again, to reduce the amount of effort required to deploy these solutions, as well as consolidate visibility, provide a single pane of glass to provide insights into what's happening across that environment. And when we think about this, we think about how we can streamline and strengthen an organization's security posture around the capabilities that we provide in that E5 security and compliance capabilities. And so, when we talk about that initial slide, we talked about all those vendors, the 50 to 70 that you may have in your environment. And as we sort of pick through those, this cost of acquisition that goes into every time you bring in a new vendor, there's the contract negotiations, the RFP, and all of these pieces that you have to go through. Obviously, that's an opportunity where you can save the amount of time that your organization is spending focused on doing those things, as well as save money by pooling some of those resources. From a deployment perspective, this idea of cloud-powered and integrated helps the IT staff who are actually operating these tools in a number of ways, right? If it's a service that you're using to protect your email environment, in the past, this was infrastructure that needed to be built, and it needed to be scaled to ensure that it could successfully and responsively scan those messages without delaying delivery downstream. When you think about it in the cloud, all of that is taken care of for you. The elasticity, the patching, the upgrade cycles is all managed for you, and the IT staff and the security staff can instead focus on how do we get value out of this. Let's focus on the configurations that are appropriate for our organization, and making sure that the tool is detecting the things that we need, and it's giving us the ability to respond without having to care about the care and feeding of that tool. Savings on automation and process improvements. When we talk about this gap in the number of security professionals that we have, we need to be we need to pay a lot of attention to how those people are being used, and we want to fill the gaps that we have in our organization with the things that computers are really good at. And so, if you think about an example, as a phishing attack, this is something that every organization faces at one time or another. One day you find out that a phishing message got through, and then, what do you immediately do? You have to go, search through message tracking logs to identify all of the places or all of the people that received that message, try to understand from there, who clicked on the message, who provided their credentials. You're going to go through probably and yank that message out of their mailbox, issue a password reset to reduce the risk that was introduced by the user clicking on that phishing attempt. And depending on the number of these, from a human perspective, this could take days or weeks to respond to. And if we instead think about all of those things that happen and how we can defend against it with artificial intelligence and machine learning, The reality is, we have platform tools that have the insights into all of this, can identify all the people that received that message, automatically pull it out of that mailbox, identify the people that clicked it, and automatically reset their passwords. Really taking that mean time to remediate that event from days and weeks down to hours and minutes, which is good because when an attack happens, those minutes matter. The quicker that you can stop the attacker as soon as you detect it, the less likely they are to achieve their ultimate goal. And then that allows them to focus on the larger and more complicated events that are coming into the environment, the ways that attackers are innovating, and have them focus on those problems instead. And all of this, in our opinion, helps you to reduce your overall costs within your security program, which helps drive down the total cost of your risk management. And so if we can move on to the next slide. And so a few statistics to sort of back up what we talked about. So, we went out and talked to our largest customers, the CISOs within those organizations, the security professionals inside of them, to really understand, how did the COVID-19 pandemic impact them? And what we heard was, 82% are feeling a pressure to reduce costs. While they're feeling that pressure to reduce costs, they're also being asked to do new things. They're being asked to look at, zero trust and how they can bring that architecture and those principles into their organization. And, Microsoft, we have a very strong opinion about that. We think that we have really great capabilities to help customers meet that. As Chad mentioned, it's something that PwC is looking at as well. And we're helping lots of customers do that. From an attack perspective, I don't think this is very surprising. From a phishing campaign efforts, we see attackers sort of following whatever events are relevant in the world. And we saw COVID-themed phishing attacks happen as a result of that. But if you live in the U.S. and in the April timeframe and late March, you start to get the IRS-themed phishing attacks, and it's not really new from a tools and tactics perspective, but it was just sort of interesting to see how the attackers tried to make use of this global challenge. And then the last thing that we heard overwhelmingly from the customers that we talked to was just, hey, we need to reduce cost is our number one priority, but we also need to make sure that we have threat protection and detection and response capabilities that are strong against, all of the assets that we have and all of the places that they're moving to. And so this slide may look familiar. It's, you may recognize it as a cyber kill chain where, on the left side, we're talking about some sort of malicious email that's coming into an environment. That malicious email may have a piece of malware attached to it, or could have a phishing URL, trying to trick the user into clicking on that and providing credentials or executing that code on their machine. Once the attackers have that foothold on that device, they're looking to expand their access and then move laterally, and they're going to do that through a variety of ways. They're going to try to look for exploits on the machine, exploit your privileged access management strategy, all with the ultimate goal of trying to exfiltrate data. And today, the attacks have changed a little bit to what we're seeing so often in the news now around ransomware attacks. And so, for the most part, attackers are still following this kill chain. It's really about what's happening in the end that may be different. In the past, it was heavily focused on data exfiltration. We've seen lots now where the ultimate goal is, data encryption, and we're starting to see a trend where it's moved more towards a double extortion type of event where the attackers are encrypting the data, but they're also stealing a copy, and they're coming back to the organization saying, hey, pay us if you want to decrypt your data, and if you don't, we're going to leak all this data that we took from you, and we're going to put you at risk for having to pay breach penalties. And as we look at, how organizations have tried to protect across this kill chain, we frequently see lots of different solutions. And it happens for a number of reasons. And, one of the reasons is, the teams responsible for these different domains look to solve the problem in the way that best suits their needs without thinking about the greater goals of the organization or, how it impacts overall costs or efficiencies within security operations centers. And so you might have the email team that's focused on solving the problem for email, and you have the endpoint team focused on the problem that they're trying to solve. And then where it becomes problematic is, attackers don't just attack email and then go away. They're moving across this kill chain. And when you have all of these different solutions in place from different vendors, you don't have integration out of the box that's providing, a single console experience to have visibility across this kill chain. And so what organizations are forced to do is try to integrate each of these products individually into their SIM, and then you either use ML models by the SIM vendor, or they have to try to build it themselves to try to string in all of the individual signals that they get from all of these products into something that's actionable. Unfortunately, lots of customers struggle with this, and what that leaves them with is gaps in their visibility and in their coverage, because they don't have an easy way to pull all this information together. And so if we jump into the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the Microsoft approach to this. And we've gone through some rebranding recently, moving to a unified Defender brand, but it was really more than just a marketing play. With the Defender brand came, cross-domain detection and response capabilities. And so the first part, if we focus on, is Microsoft 365 Defender is a set of capabilities to defend against this entire kill chain, brought to a security analyst in a single pane of glass, with machine learning models built within the product to understand that, hey, if an email gets in, it's going to land on an endpoint, it's going to have a file associated with it, and it may result in activities related to what the user is doing, as well as data exfiltration. And the ML models can take all of these signals and say, hey, I see something here, I see something here, I see something here. On their own, maybe they're not that significant, but when we bring that together, it becomes a much more serious incident, something that we prioritize for our SOC analysts to focus on, and then giving the ability to remediate across that. In single remediation, block that message from coming in the future, pull it from all the mailboxes, delete it from the endpoints, and reset credentials associated with that. In the infrastructure space, we have a number of capabilities inside of Azure Defender that help you to do that, from virtual machine protection, platform services. And then we have our cloud native SIM sitting on top of this. There's still a place for SIM in the world, and it's typically the centerpiece of a SOC. And we've built Azure Sentinel to address a lot of the challenges that customers have had. It's really that care and feeding of a SIM versus focusing on getting value out of the SIM. And so, being cloud native, it inherits those proper characteristics of a cloud service, namely elasticity. And so, it's going to grow and shrink as you need it, and you're not going to have to overbuild a SIM to deal with the periodic bursts that you may get throughout the year. And this allows you to have unified event management across your organization from your Microsoft estate, as well as from your other cloud and your other security products, so that your analysts can start their investigations again from a single pane of glass. And so if we jump to the next slide, I think I'll turn it over to Chad.
Well, thanks very much, Dan. I think that was an excellent summary of kind of walking through. You talked about some of the challenges up front. I'm going to try to summarize some of that here And this is really the case for why we need to do portfolio rationalization. So here's some of the challenges that companies are facing today with respect to their security suite. So many have tools that are under leveraged and not getting their full value. For example, they may be capable of more functionality or cover additional categories in the NIST CSF framework that aren't being used today. You probably have some tools in your environment that are duplicating functions. Most security tools are bundled to many different functions. So in our experience, we see a lot of overlap in functionality in terms of what is possible. Having each tool's capabilities fully mapped out can show you where there are overlaps with opportunities to reduce that redundancy. You likely have some tools that don't fully integrate with each other. Dan kind of talked about this. This includes the proprietary data flows, the needs for specialized connectors to be built, or other middleware solutions. Rationalization can sometimes reveal a more simple but elegant solution that increases visibility and unlocks the full power of the underlying data because it is available for use in more of your suite and tools that you have. If you have a wide variety of tools, your people are most likely having a varied experience. So that has an impact from a people perspective. It can have other implications as well. For example, for compliance with regulatory requirements, where in many instances, things like CMMC, for those that are dealing with DoD most recently, where those processes and procedures have to be very well documented. The more pathways you have for accomplishing the same task, that can multiply the documentation and upkeep required. You may be overspending. Keep in mind that many tools are data volume centric in terms of their pricing model. Your strategy on what data to retain, for what purpose, lengths, types, etc., depending on where that data is ingested, can have an impact as well. Dan talked a little bit about the total cost of ownership that should be factored in beyond just the licensing cost. What are the operating costs, the training costs, et cetera, that need to be considered? The more tools you have, the more likely you'll be that you're not sure that you have the best visibility of your portfolio. These become part of the attack surface as well. And even security tools need patching and updates and versioning control and those sorts of things. So you need to factor that in as well. And finally, as part of a challenge here, we all know that cyber changes quickly. The adversaries are advancing their techniques, evolving new regulations and compliance. Laws are changing as well. And so, keeping your portfolio to keep pace with that is definitely important. So we talked a little bit about why the need for rationalization. You may be asking yourself, well, why don't I just have my security team sort of roll up their sleeves and go in and do this as a project and conduct this rationalization? Let's just talk about a little bit of the challenges of the rationalization itself. So on the first front, from a people perspective, almost all security organizations have their duties separated, meaning it requires input from many different stakeholders in order to gain the full picture of what's in your suite. Secondly, most of your organization is probably heavily leveraged today. People are busy focused on their day-to-day roles of operating and security. So it's difficult to stop and rationalize before moving forward. And there's often not one right answer, meaning different options will need to be explored through a variety of different dimensions, including cost and risk and fit for purpose, relationships, compliance, etc. From a process perspective, the tools each have a function and purpose, and mapping those purposes is not a trivial exercise. You have to determine a framework or a standard also to do the mapping, and you have to consider more than just mapping to a domain, specific features important to an organization, certain risks that need to be considered, compliance that's required, etc. And the technology on that side, just the process of gathering all of that data can be a real challenge. It can go deeper than just a list of tools. It can include different modules, versions, etc. If products are from a suite, knowing which suite has the various products included also requires a lot of homework. The point of this being that you can benefit from the help of a third party to help you rationalize your suite using an organization that has experience doing this a number of times across a wide variety of different tool suites. You'll benefit from the economies of scale from a group that has dedicated time, attention, and focus to the process of rationalization. And that's where PwC and Microsoft have been working together to do a lot of that upfront heavy lifting. And our approach is meant to take the hard work of this rationalization out and make this easier for organizations to accomplish. So up to this point, we talked about the challenges of security tools and also how the challenges related to rationalization efforts and the why it is important to rationalize. We're now going to shift into how to rationalize your efforts and how we go about doing that within our Microsoft and PwC alliance. So first, from a utilization perspective, one way that we get started is looking at your existing technology. What tools do you have today? And were you aware that you had all these tools and how you were using them? So it starts with an inventory. Then we look at the capabilities included in your suite of tools, what domains they can cover, and are you using them for all of the domains or just a subset? We then look at your suite of tools and how you have them configured to look at your environment and check that alignment with your strategy and objectives. This helps us to map coverage and spot gaps where you may not have full coverage and with your current suite and applications. Also, we look at the cost of the respective capability coverage by your tools. And when we talked about this, it's not just that direct licensing, but it's also, in terms of the total cost of ownership, things like cost to shift from one solution to the next, the OpEx cost of your operations, platforms and hosting needs, the amount of training and certification needed by people, all that kind of goes into that TCO. Then we move into kind of the rationalization state. And once we have a full picture of what you're utilizing today, we start to do that rationalization. What are the redundant capabilities that you have and how can we assist in making the decision on what to keep, which also factors in cost, strategy, objectives, your people, skills, etc. This is also the step to ensure that there's a good, sound reason behind each investment that you're making in your product suite. And then finally, we move into the optimize phase, and this is really where it's decision time, not only on what redundancies to take out, but also where there are gaps to address that may require adding tools. Our experience is that the net effect is usually removing more tools than adding new ones, but it is important to note that we sometimes find situations where additional tools are needed, where there's a gap that needs to be filled. This is also a very important step in terms of exploring different options. There's more than one right answer sometimes, and offering a weighted set of options that factors in cost, risk, and strategy is helpful to getting to the right answer. And adjusting your suite will take some commitment in doing, so we want to make sure that we help organizations get to the best answer for them. So there are really two aspects of our approach that can assist in making this process easier. The first is we leverage automation during our data collection activities. We use a digital questionnaire that comes preloaded with a drop-down mapping of security tools and capabilities. And this makes the job of collecting the data much easier. We're also able to collect data from a various number of stakeholders and POCs simultaneously, which reduces the length of time required to do this discovery. We have the ability to do this as a bulk upload and ingest of data into our system. We normalize that data and ingest it so it's in a category by category match. And we find that many clients will already find value in gaining understanding about their portfolio from the very start of this data collection exercise. The second aspect of our approach is the visualization. You'll have the ability to see how your selected tools, both current and target state, show coverage against industry security frameworks and where there's redundancy, gaps, sourced by vendor, etc. The visualization is also a very dynamic view, and while we pre-populate several options before the meeting, you'll have the chance in the meeting to make changes, do what-if scenarios, ask questions, and to see how it will affect the coverage. And while it's not completely automated, we still have a team of expert consultants that will guide through the service and do homework, on questions. This will help to get to answers much quicker than perhaps a standard approach of just receiving a report at the end of an engagement. So we thought we'd lay out the process for you and how we would conduct a typical portfolio rationalization. We start with the digital questionnaire that I mentioned, and we use that to help guide the collection of this data. And of course, we supplement that with assistance to fill in any gaps through conversations and interviews and that sort of thing. Like we mentioned previously, we can do this step in parallel with numerous stakeholders without the need of having a lengthy interview and meeting process one owner at a time. Questionnaire also has the benefit of ensuring that we don't miss something and we get to the nuance of exactly how your existing suite of tools is being used. We then conduct a workshop with you based on the analysis with dynamic visualizations to help the decision-making process and weighing of options. We explore the target state you were looking for and show the potential options to get to the maximum out of what you're already paying for and reduce the overall cost. Whether you have an E3 license, you're considering an E5 license in the future, or you already have an E5 license, we can show you how to get the most out of your present situation, and we'll likely show you things included in your license that you aren't taking full advantage of today. You may still decide to go with other solutions, but at least you'll have a very sound reasoning as to why you've made that decision and something that you can share with others when asked. In phase 3 for strategic planning, we map out the future journey of your selected choices, as well as supporting additional flow, follow on and what if scenarios, selection of different Microsoft product suites, etc. This is your actionable roadmap that you can now take with with associated milestones, checkpoints, etc. So up to this point, we've done a lot of talking, and we thought it might make sense to share with you a little more of what it actually looks like behind the scenes with the investments we've made in automation and visualization that helps with the rationalization efforts. But also, hopefully, this gives you a glimpse of what it would be like to work with us on your important project. Here's a short demo that we've recorded and will play with an accompanying voice track.
Thank you all for joining today's demo on PwC's Portfolio Rationalization Service using our Portfolio Analyzer Accelerator. The goal of this service offering is to help our clients better understand the Microsoft security solutions within their environment today, as well as help them identify areas where they can rationalize around the Microsoft security platform, enabling them to reduce the use and reliance on third-party solutions. Today, we'll be walking through our data collection, current state analysis, and what if analysis using our accelerator. Without further ado, let's jump right in. We can jump into our data collection. Here we have two main options available to us. The first option being our file upload, where we can send a template over to our clients. They can populate that template, send it back to us. We can upload this information into our accelerator. On upload, the data within the templates are checked for data validation. You'll see here in this example, our file has uploaded. However, there has been one issue within that file related to this Data Management Pro product. Here you'll see an alignment to the protect domain as well as a risk assessment capability. Indicated here, the risk assessment capability should be aligned to identified domain, and as such has errored out on this solution. We can work with our clients to better understand their data as part of this upload process to ensure the data coming in is clean. The second option available to us is our manual upload, where we can work with our clients throughout the engagement to add and remove solutions as they are provided to us. So here you'll see we can enter in a vendor, the specific product name, and we can already see it pre-mapped up into the applicable NIST CSF domains. Additionally, we can use these screens to update information that has provided to us previously or remove solutions within this table here. Once the data collection process is complete, we can move on to our current state analysis. On load of the current state, we are presented with a view of NIST CSF across the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover domains, and our client's respective coverage on a technology basis across these domains. We can drill into each of these domains and are presented with the associated categories and can drill down into each category to see the associated subcapability alignment. Within this scenario, we're going to dive into the protect domain under the protective technology category. Here we can see a couple different sub-capabilities and can go through these to analyze our client's current state. In this example, we'll see a couple overlaps with solutions on the full disk encryption and removable media encryption sub-capabilities. This enables us to have quick conversations with our clients about how they are using some of these overlapping technologies today and potentially offer up an option for them to rationalize around the BitLocker solution with their existing E3 licensing. Throughout this engagement, we'd continue on and dive in to do similar analysis across each of the categories and domains within this CSF, working with our clients to identify the opportunities for them to better utilize their existing technologies related to the Microsoft E3 or E5 security solutions. As we move away from the current state analysis into our what if or scenario analysis, we can start working with our clients to identify and rationalize and standardize around a security platform that will work for them in the future. In the what if analysis, we can start off by loading our current state and go through each of the products within this new middle future state column to identify the Microsoft solutions which would be able to replace it. In this scenario, we see a couple different solutions that may be opportunities for our clients to rationalize around the E5 security suite. For example, here we have the XDR solution. We can go ahead and remove that solution from our potential future state and look up potential corresponding Microsoft products. In this case, the Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Identity and Defender Antivirus solutions. We can go ahead and drag those into their respective areas. We can also look up other solutions which our client may be interested in removing. We have our antivirus solution, which again kind of overlaps with that Microsoft Defender antivirus solution we loaded in previously. We can go ahead and remove that. We see a cloud security solution. We can go ahead and remove that and look up our cloud app security solution or MCAS. We can do this across each of the different corresponding solutions in our client's environment, as well as the Microsoft product options. And once we're done, we can add in a potential associated cost with moving to these Microsoft products. We can go ahead and evaluate what that product mix looks like. And we can see here that working with this, we have an increase in coverage across the detect, respond domains, as well as potential cost savings associated with moving to the Microsoft products. We can drill down similarly as we did on the current state into each of these domains to see what does that product mix look like and how does that product provide coverage across each of these domains. So as we dive into the respond domain, we can see the different products that are providing coverage within this domain, as well as how the potential Microsoft solutions has provided coverage or additional coverage within this domain. We can mouse over each of the different solutions to see the different sub-capabilities or technology capabilities that they are providing within this domain and work with our clients to provide coverage or identify solutions that provide the coverage they need for the risks within their environment. At the end of this engagement, we can go over to our future state views and download a CSV file containing the information reviewed and work with our clients offline to produce reports and other information for their review after our engagements. Thank you for your time today. This has been a great overview of our portfolio rationalization service offering using our Portfolio Analyzer Accelerator. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
All right. Hopefully that shows you a little bit of the glimpse behind the scenes of what it would be like in working with us, the process that we go through, the visualizations, the what if analysis, and really putting you in the driver's seat. Each year, PwC surveys over 3,000 people in the security industry to gather perspectives on the latest trends. This year, our Global Digital Trust Insight survey revealed that over 1/3 strongly agree that organizations can strengthen their security posture while also maintaining costs using automation and rationalization efforts. So we just thought we would share that. In terms of a quick review of our approach to rationalization, the impact and outcomes you can expect, Our approach will assist you in improving utilization of your current solutions and delivering more value from what you already invested in. We can likely help reduce your costs by elimination of redundant security tools and taking more advantage of the ones already included in your license bundle that come at no additional cost. We'll likely help you to identify security gaps in your current view, align to the NIST cybersecurity framework, and suggest solutions to help close those gaps. And we'll assist you along the way of adapting to the latest trends, both from a threat actor's perspective and their latest techniques, as well as the advent of new technology, digital transformation, and cloud adoption as it applies to your strategy. As we near the end of our webinar, we thought you might like to hear about how we've helped others before. This scenario involved a very large healthcare company that was evaluating an E5 license and the potential benefits achievable through the included security suite of tools bundled. But the same type of analysis will be beneficial whether you're on an existing E3 license, will be evaluating E5 in the future, or you already have an E5 and you're looking to gain the most out of it. In this example, the client had a need to reduce their overall security spend with tightening budgets. They had a lot of pain points associated with endpoint solutions, having a number of duplications, but also desire to further their cloud migration and the security associated with it. We worked with the executive leaderships to first gather the information about their environment using our digital questionnaire process. After gathering that information on the suite of tools and how they were using them, we conducted some workshops with them to help see how those overlaps between those things and what they were paying for each in an endpoint solution versus those that came bundled in an E5 license. We showed them how the E5 solutions would actually give them some greater visibility, more seamless connections between their tools, improve their overall security posture, etc. We tied their rationale with their decisions into a visualization so they could easily view and share their future directions, but also could see the why behind these decisions. Ultimately, this drove several business outcomes. We successfully helped them reduce their overall security spend substantially, cutting licensing costs, additional maintenance, training, and operations. We helped them to simplify their environment. We replaced 5 endpoint security products with 1 Microsoft product. We helped them arrive at a hybrid cloud model combining MCAS and a third-party SWG to accomplish their cloud security use cases. And finally, we helped them enhance their overall security posture, deriving the capabilities they already had in their E3 license with new E5 features. I'd like to pass it over to Dan for a few final thoughts on the potential outcomes achievable via the Microsoft Security Suite.
Thanks, Chad. I really love what you guys have done with that tool. I could see tons of value for the customers that I work with and helping them to understand the capabilities, the overlap, and justify making changes towards a different future state. From an outcomes perspective, there's a lot that's provided inside of the an E5 security and compliance bundle. There's those sub capabilities often mapped to lots of products that customers already have inside of their environment. We can see potential replacement for up to 40 of those products. Microsoft isn't looking to be the only security vendor in your portfolio, but we're focused on the areas to help you be secure from a zero trust perspective, helping you to protect where you're doing business, whether it's on-prem or in our cloud or in a third-party cloud. And these product capabilities and the overlap that you have, through calculators that we provide, and if you work with PwC, that the tool that they've demonstrated, we've seen organizations save up to 60% on their security spend by consolidating around E5. And so in the interest of time, let's jump into the next slide so that we leave a few minutes for questions. But just to touch briefly on those 40 capabilities, this slide does a good job to lay out how we organize those capabilities across different pillars. The first being identity and access management, the pieces that exist within there, threat, unified endpoint, helping customers protect their data, around discovering of the sensitive data in their environment, applying governance, and then eventually data loss prevention controls. And then the last around cloud security. And what's important to think about and to dispel any myths of is when Microsoft talks about cloud security, we're not building these products just to protect the Microsoft cloud environments. We absolutely do that, and we do that better than anyone else, but the products that we make are meant to meet customers, all of you, wherever you are. And so if you're in third-party SaaS apps, if you're in third-party IaaS and PaaS providers, or you're still doing business on-prem, the tooling that we build is meant to help extend those security capabilities and meet you where you're at. And so if we sort of wind it down with one last slide, we couldn't do one of these talks without citing some of the recognition that we get from the industry analysts. And so, our approach to security as a company, that this idea of being cloud-powered, integrated into the products that you're using, so that there's not additional efforts, bringing simplicity around, having unified visibility, integration between products. That approach doesn't need to be a trade-off when you're considering the best tool to accomplish a particular goal. And you can see the recognition that we've obtained through these Gartner Magic Quadrants. From a peer perspective or a competitor perspective, we're neck and neck and often ahead of those other companies. And it's unfortunate, but this is the latest version of this slide that we're allowed to show. But since then, many of these Magic Quadrants have changed. And if you go look at the existing Magic Quadrants from 2020, you'll see that there's a much bigger gap between us and the other folks that are represented here. And what I wish that Gartner would do a better job highlighting is, hey, we're doing a great job competing in these individual capabilities, but they aren't recognizing the sort of the platform approach and the additional value that customers receive in helping to protect their organizations through the integrations across all of these capabilities. And with that, turn it back to Chad or turn it over to Sloan for Q&A.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. So one final thought before I turn this over to Sloan to kind of open up for some questions. But you just talked about in the last slide the kind of the Magic Quadrants and where things currently stack. One thing that may not be factored in there is the value and power of an alliance. And so I thought I'd just take a second and talk about the value of our PwC and Microsoft alliance. You've got the opportunity to innovate and evolve your business with strategic business process solutions from PwC, powered by Microsoft. And together we offer a customer-centric fusion of business strategy and methodology that's agile, integrated, and end-to-end with technologies. So, to pull a quote, business-led and Microsoft technology enabled. And for those new to PwC and our alliance, PwC provides an extensive strategy an advisory set of services and business process solutions. We're famed for those business process methodologies, industry research and knowledge, and our global network. Microsoft uses its own industry and customer insights to deliver a trusted, agile, interoperable canvas of technologies that power today's and tomorrow's business. And our customers win as a result of this major complementary alignment. Microsoft has many partnerships and alliances in industry, but we're very proud to say that our alliance is particularly strong. In fact, PwC was named as the 2020 winner of the prestigious Microsoft SCI, or Security, Compliance, and Identity Advisor of the Year award. And this award is specifically given for security advisory firms that are building core competencies on top of Microsoft security solutions and acting as a trusted advisor to Microsoft's customers. So from both of our companies, we'd like to thank you very much for taking the time today to hear about our alliance and our portfolio rationalization service. And we'd now like to open the call to any questions that you may have. Sloan?
Yes, so Chad, thanks, Chad. And thank you, Dan. Fantastic presentation. And you can imagine lots of questions. We probably only have time for a couple. So I'm going to tee up a question that to both you, Dan, and Chad. It's around tooling. So it's really, I'm posing it to both of you because part of the question is which Microsoft products or areas do clients typically see the most benefit or overlap with their existing third-party tools. And I'm posing it to both of you, since I think, Dan, you can probably talk really tool specific, and Chad, you can probably talk experience-wise what we've seen. So I'll pose it to you both. Thank you.
You want to go first, Chad, or you want me to jump in?
Go ahead, Dan.
So from I think there's two parts to that. Thanks, Sloan, for that question. The overlap with existing technologies and then the ones that customers provide the most value from. From an endpoint protection perspective, it's a place where we often find that we need to do a better job to instrument and understand what's happening on that platform. And what we often hear from customers is if they have a dollar to spend, that dollar is best spent in bringing more security to the endpoint. And so Defender for Endpoint becomes one of those products that becomes very easy to deploy and provides a significant amount of value associated with it. From an overlap perspective, it's sort of all over the board. I have some opinions, but I'll let Chad sort of talk about what he's seen from customers and where that overlap frequently exists.
Yeah, and it can vary a little bit depending upon situation and which license you may have today. If you're an E3 holder today, it could be things like Defender, BitLocker. Disk encryption and base antivirus and malware has become more of a commodity in 2021. So organizations that have Windows 10 E3 and are not using those products, potentially wasting money on alternative solutions. So that's certainly something to think about. On the E5 front, EDR tools. You mentioned Defender for Endpoint, Windows ATP, and that can replace other EDR tools in industry that are out there. So we had an example earlier. We shared about the major healthcare company that we helped, and we replaced 5 products and endpoint related products to that. So I think that's probably the biggest area that we've seen.
Thank you both. And so I'm going to switch. Last question, Chad, I'm going to tee this one up to you. It's more about effectively managing this process of tools rationalization. And the question is, how do you manage that to achieve that next wave of IT cost reduction, if I understand it? I'll let you comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, got it. Well, so portfolio rationalization is definitely one of the steps in controlling IT cost. And typically, licensing and technology costs are a static line in the budget, being adjusted as new technologies are acquired. So once your technology spend and technologies are under control, you can begin looking at other areas of cost reduction. One thing that we really haven't talked about here on the call is also the fact that some of the things that you may be looking at here could be eligible for cyber R&D tax credits, for example, where you're experimenting in your tooling and you're adjusting for measurements and things like that. It has to pass a 4-part test, but a lot of organizations are just not taking full advantage of the R&D tax credits that may be eligible for them. And portfolio rationalization can help to kind of guide to those answers. So just something else to consider.
Well, thank you, Chad, for that answer to that question. I'm sure that is also intriguing to some people to get more information. Dan, thank you for a fantastic presentation. Chad, also thank you for a fantastic presentation today. With that, I will wrap up taking the questions and answers, and we certainly will try to answer more in writing. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Dan, Chad, and Sloan, and thank you everyone for joining today. We've posted a link in the Q&A panel to a short survey. We value your feedback to help us improve future events like this and welcome your input on the information shared today. So thank you for submitting. This concludes today's webinar. Again, thank you all for joining, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Thank you.